Hi, I'm Dale and these are my books. Today we're going to be talking about The Swimming Pool Library um, by somebody called Hollinghurst. Now, this book is a gay classic. It was written or published in 1988 by Alan Hollinghurst, and it was set in the beginning of the 1980s. And so this was the period in Britain of, I suppose, the closest you ever got at the time of some sort of total gay liberation, but before the HIV/AIDS crisis. And one of the things with this novel is that there is a great deal of casual sex all the time. And a lot of it borders on the pornographic, but it's done in a very interesting way. It's not about pornography and having sex just for the sake of having sex. But one of the things that Alan Hollinghurst conveys is that the main character, somebody called William Beckwith, has a fairly empty life. Will is 25 years of age, and he has an inherited wealth, which is so great that he doesn't need to work at the age of 25. He doesn't need to work, and he will never need to work. And in fact, in my personal life, I have known someone like this. And both my knowing this person in my personal life and William, the character in this book, because he doesn't have to work, his life is fairly meaningless. It's empty. He doesn't know what to do with himself. And in the case of William, what he does with himself is that he wanders around London. He has lots of casual sex. He goes to the club where he will eat food, where he will swim, where he will go to the showers afterwards and see men in various states of undress, and he will discuss their I'm not sure what to say on YouTube. He will discuss their genital organs again and again and again and again in great detail. It reminded me a little bit of American Psycho in the way that the author in American Psycho would describe inconsequential things in fastidious detail in order to convey to the reader the superficiality in his own life. So what is the story of this novel? Will goes into a public toilet, as some 25-year-old gay men did at the time, in order to meet up with other men, in order to have sex. In that public toilet, there is an old man. He's in his early 80s. And this old man actually has a heart attack and he collapses to the floor. And in a fairly unconvincing scene, Will gives him the kiss of life. He um, comes back to the real world, and he has saved the man's life. A few days later, William happens to see this man at his club, and this man is actually somebody called Lord Nantwich. And Lord Nantwich is a member of the House of Lords. He's a member of the aristocracy. He is himself gay, and he is himself very rich. So Lord Nantwich says to Will, "You saved my life. You must come over and have drinks. You must come over and have lunch." And a relationship between this 25-year-old gay man, a non-sexual relationship between this 25-year-old gay man, Will, and Lord Nantwich develops. Lord Nantwich talks about his own life, and he says, "Yes, I used to be gay back in the day, and I kept journals. And I would like you, Will, I know you don't have to work, but I would like you to write my biography, or at least edit the journals, or get all of these personal papers together in some way, because I can trust that you will do a good job." And what Will does is that as he's living his life from day to day in his various promiscuous relationships, he's going through these handwritten notes, he's going through the photographs in order to get together Lord Nantwich's life in his own mind so he can start writing the biography. It gets to the point, however, where he starts reading something about Lord Nantwich's life, which is very personal for Will. What he does is that he learns that Lord Nantwich has actually been in trouble with the police in the past, and he was arrested and charged for having gay sex at a time when it was illegal, and Lord Nantwich was disgraced for having gay sex and spent 6 months in prison. What makes this a powerful thing for Will is that Will finds out who was behind the criminal prosecution, and it was none other than his grandfather. His grandfather was the director of public prosecutions at the time. It was his grandfather that led the anti-gay campaign. It was his grandfather that was in the courtroom, when Lord Nantwich was being sentenced for having gay sex. And it is this grandfather, in order to avoid estate duties, has passed on his inheritance to Will while the grandfather is still alive, in order to avoid estate taxes. Now, did I enjoy this book? I did enjoy this book. I think there were weaknesses about it. It's a little bit too long for me. It's 414 pages. It could have been a bit shorter. I think the writing could have been a bit tighter. I'm not so much impressed by some of the vocabulary that he uses. I like to think that I have a reasonable vocabulary, and this author sent me running to the dictionary every so often in order to try to work out what words meant. I really don't like, because my knowledge of French is very small, I really don't like French sayings and French phrases when plain old Anglo-Saxon will do. And also, although he used to write for an architecture magazine in the novel, he also uses sometimes just too many architectural phrases, and if I can either try to make my way through the novel, or I can actually look them up. So for example, just one example, on page 203 of my edition, the the author, is talking about how he is on a rooftop, and on the top of this rooftop there's a little Gothic fence of iron finials and terracotta quatrefoils. Now, we discussed this at a book club, and there were people there who were very learned, and they knew what finials and quatrefoils were, but I didn't, and I had to look them up in a dictionary. Beyond the finials and the quatrefoils, the roofs fell steeply away, caught up here and there into dormers, whatever that was, and punctuated with parapets. And again, I have a vague idea about what a parapet is, but I had to look that up. And turret-like protrusions. What exactly is a turret? I knew it had something to do with castles and a bit of a tower or something like that, but I actually had to look that up in order to see that a turret is a tower, a little tower coming off a big tower. And by the time you look up all of these words, you then realise that that there are other buildings, and these other buildings are the Senate House, the Centre Point, and the Great Dome of the British Museum Reading Room. And so when I got towards the end of the paragraph, it was a matter of me saying, oh yes, that's right, where is he again? Yes, he's in London, that's right, because I had been taken down this back lane of architectural technicalities like finials and quatrefoils and dormers and parapets and turrets. It's a fun book, and as was pointed out during the discussion, when we were having this discussion during the book group, probably no other gay book was so frank about sex. until this book came along. So there were books in Britain, at least, but also in the United States with City of Night and others, where the where any sort of sex was described in very obscure terms, or everything came up to sex, and then where you would expect a paragraph describing sex, that paragraph is missing, and then people are smoking a cigarette or something like that. But that is certainly not the case with this book by Hollinghurst. There is sex, sex, sex. There's a lot of sex, and it's described in detail. And I imagine some people have written about the question as to what point does a serious novel, at what point does it become pornography? Because I could easily imagine, perhaps not today, but perhaps 100 years ago, some of these descriptions of sex passing for pornography. The other, I'm not sure if it's a weakness, but if we see this novel as being the way that Will sees the world, then we get the novel. I understand the novel, but it doesn't stand up to objective analysis. There are no women in this book. The only woman in this book is one very minor character at the very beginning, and she's only there for a few seconds. The other thing with this book is that almost everyone is gay. Like, it's difficult to think of a character, except for the father of Rupert, who is straight, but everyone is gay. And on every tube, in every pool, in every group shower, in every social occasion, there are men who are gay, or there are men who we don't know what their sexuality is, but we can see the outline of their genitals and so on. So it's a very super sexually graphic book, but it's not particularly sexy. In one scene towards the end, there is a situation where, again, I'm polishing this up for YouTube, there is a situation where a man does something to another man on a butcher's counter. And I think that was a really good way of putting it, that this is just meat, just being pounded. There's nothing sexy about it at all. It's just a physical act, which is a reflection on the character of Will himself, and also possibly a reflection of a lot of the gay culture that was around in London at that time in the early 1980s. So it's a fun book. Some women apparently have said that they found this book to be amazingly insightful into a culture that they just didn't know about. If women do believe that, I think they're a little bit misled. This is a bit of a fantasy novel in a way, rather than an accurate depiction of a particular social set. It's a fun book. He has written lots of other stuff which I haven't read, and I will be very interested in reading some of his other novels in the future. So I hope that helps, and thank you for listening.